Shall we start? Great. So I'm delighted to introduce, I think I've got housekeeping.
The National Brain Pill will be here, and if you're looking for this lady, you'll be disappointed because she's not coming. This is Steph. Steph's not coming, so her friend and colleague Sian is coming along, but she doesn't look like that, okay? But we will get her to come and give you a lovely wave when she comes at lunchtime.
Brilliant, and she'll have what's
She'll have lots of sort of goodies, and you can talk to her about any fundraising activities.
Brilliant. So, I think we're on time. Welcome and announcements, that's me. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Laurent Sheybani. He's going to speak for about half an hour on sleep disorder, sleep changes in Lewy dementia. And then we're going to bring up a couple of members to talk about their experiences with sleep disorders, and then Q&A session afterwards. Some lunch, and then we're going to hear about the Lewy Bodies Network from Esther after lunch. And then Sian is going to tell us, I love this, something positive out of tragedy. So you'll tell us more. And then we'll hear about the monthly peer support groups from Karen, Tapson, and from Nikki Zimmermann, and then a Q&A, and then we'll wrap up at 2:30. So, Dr. Laurent Sheybani is a medical doctor, and he specialised in adult neurology, trained in sleep medicine at the University Hospital of Geneva, and holds a certificate of sleep medicine from the European Sleep Research Society. He has gained further expertise and experience in cognitive disorders while training with Professor Alali in Geneva. And besides his clinical activity, he has research activity focusing on the interactions between epilepsy and sleep. Since July 2022, he's a clinical and research fellow here at UCL, and is working together with the team with Professor Matthew Walker on a project that's on the edge between epilepsy and sleep. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very happy to be here. It's also quite new for me to discuss research and clinic with a public of patients and families. So if I'm too superficial or if I give too much details, you can just raise your hand and tell me to refocus on different things. My presentation is, I would say, rather short. I have some supplementary slides. So again, if you think I'm going too much into the details or if I'm not speaking too much about certain things, you can just ask and hopefully I will have some slides on your questions. I'm very happy to be here because when we care about patients with a chronic disease, at the beginning we teach them to patients and to families a lot of things. We explain them the disease, how we will care about the patients and family. We teach them a little bit about the mechanism of the disease as well. But with time, patients and family become almost as much as us specialized in the disease. So I'm hoping to learn a lot today. And in exchange, I hope to be able to teach you a little bit about sleep disorders in Lewy body dementia. I wanted to start with some definitions. Rimona told me that you already know everything about this. So I will maybe go quick on these definitions, but I thought it was important to clarify because there are different levels in these definitions and sometimes that can be quite confusing to patients and family. So we have the definitions that can be made by the clinicians based on history taking, based on examinations, sometimes complementary examination, and we have the diagnostic that can be made by the pathologist. So the clinician can make the diagnostic of dementia with Lewy bodies, and we will discuss briefly the core features of dementia with Lewy bodies, or he can make the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease dementia, which is basically a dementia that occurs in a context of Parkinson's disease. And then the pathologist will look at brain sample and can make the diagnosis of a disease that is, histologically proven. Parkinson's disease, dementia, and dementia with Lewy bodies, altogether they form what we call Lewy body dementia. And the pathologist can make the diagnosis of Lewy body disease. Why is it important to make the difference between the pathologist and the clinicians? The reason is that there is not 100% overlap between what we find in the brain and what we see in the symptoms and signs of patients. For example, in this study, they looked at a cohort of patients with Alzheimer's disease, and they had access to autopsy after patient passed away, and some of them had Lewy body disease, others didn't have Lewy body disease, and they compared how many of these patients had extrapyramidal signs, that is Parkinsonism signs, such as trembling or gait instability or slowing of movement, etc. What they found is that there is not much difference in terms of Parkinsonism or extrapyramidal sign, if you want, between patients with or without Lewy body. So just this to show you that you don't have 100% overlap between what the pathologist sees and what the clinician sees. And that's the reason why we have so many definitions. How do we make the diagnosis? We have an essential symptom, which is neurocognitive deficit or dementia, hence the name of dementia with Lewy body. And then we have core criteria that must be present for the probable diagnostic, and then we have some biomarkers. We won't go into the details of biomarker for the sake of time. The core criteria, you probably know them. There is a fluctuating cognition or attention, Parkinsonism, so gait instability, trembling or tremor, slowing of movement, and rigidity in the movement. We have REM sleep behavioral disorder that we will discuss in more detail afterwards. And visual hallucination, or hallucination in general. The visual hallucinations are much more frequent than other types of hallucination. So this is a very short introduction on dementia with Lewy body. And now I'd like to discuss in more detail sleep issues in patients with dementia with Lewy body. So what are they? I'd like to give you the approximate prevalence of different sleep disturbances in the general population and in patients with dementia with Lewy body, just to have an overview of what are these sleep disturbances. If I say excessive daytime sleepiness, so being particularly sleepy during the day, who think that this is more frequent in patients with dementia with Lewy body? You can just raise your hand if you think it's more frequent. Maybe half the audience. Who thinks it's more frequent in the general population? 1%. Who thinks it's approximately the same between these two? Just 1 or 2%. Well, it's more frequent in patients with dementia with Lewy body, and it's actually quite a main problem in this patient. In general, sleep issues are quite an important problem in patients with dementia with Lewy body. Excessive daytime sleepiness is one of them. It's quite a burden on the patient, on the family, and it affects the quality of sleep, it affects the quality of life as well. So we will go, I will tell you a little bit more about this later. REM sleep behavioral disorder, I will explain to you what it is in a few slides. It's one of the defining features of dementia with Lewy body, and it's obviously much more frequent in this population. Obstructive sleep apnea is as much frequent in the general population than in patients with dementia with Lewy body, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about this. It's very frequent in the general population, and it can lead to excessive daytime sleepiness, for example. So it's definitely something that should be screened in patients with DLB. Insomnia, I was quite surprised when I reviewed the literature because it seems to be as frequent in patients with DLB than in patients in the general population. But while it's probably as frequent in these two populations, the causes are very much different, which means that the management is also very much different. So it's definitely something that should be carefully screened with the GP or with the neurologist and then managed. Restless leg syndrome is a disorder where patients suffer from a sort of uncomfortable urge to move the legs, especially at the end of the day, especially when they go to sleep. And to relieve these symptoms, these uncomfortable symptoms, they start to walk, they start to move. So it's quite destructive in terms of sleep quality. And the association with dementia with Lewy body is not that clear. It seems to be as frequent as in the general population. And last but not least, nightmares. Also much, yeah, we have a question. Yeah?
Is cramps part of the restless leg syndrome?
No, it's a different things. If you have cramps, it's not restless leg syndrome. Now, cramps can have different definitions according to people, so it's important to carefully investigate what you understand or what you think is cramp. By definition, cramp, you must see a movement of the muscle, you must have pain, and so this should be carefully investigated by the doctor. But it's different from restless leg syndrome. So nightmares are much more frequent in patients with DLB, and this is not anecdotal, because it can have quite a negative impact on sleep quality and on quality of life in general. So this is also something that we should care about. There are treatments against nightmare, and I'm not talking only about pills. There are also, a cognitive approach to manage nightmares. So this should be correctly and carefully managed. REM sleep behavior disorder, as I said, is a core feature of dementia with Lewy body. And this is something that should be investigated and screened. What is REM sleep to begin with? When you record the electrical activity of the brain with EEG, you will see different rhythm in this EEG. So wake stands for wakefulness, and then you have different sleep stages. And here is the electrical activity of the brain. So it goes up when it's positive, it goes down when it's negative, and you have some sort of a succession of waves. Those are the brain waves. And then, as you can see, between wakefulness and N3, which is the deepest stage of sleep, the activity changes a lot. You have large amplitude, slow oscillations during the deepest stage of sleep, while you have some sort of a mixed frequency and low amplitude during wakefulness. REM sleep is a particular stage with an activity that looks like wakefulness. However, it's associated with the paralysis. So the body is paralyzed. You cannot move any part of your body except for the eyes. The eyes present with rapid eye movement. So REM sleep, anyone with has REM sleep when he or she sleeps, and this is characterized by this paralysis of the body. We don't exactly know why we are paralyzed during this sleep stage. It might be related to the fact that many dreams occur during REM sleep, and to prevent us from moving during our dreams, the body has invented this paralysis so that we don't act our dream out. But we also dream during other stages of sleep, so it's not the only reason why there is this paralysis. This is a picture, I think, that reflects nicely what is REM sleep behavior disorder. In REM sleep behavior disorder, we lose this paralysis during sleep. So that if we dream that we are playing football, we can start kicking balls in our bed, we can start punching or even running or standing, walking, etc. We start to act our dream, and this behavior is called dream enactment behavior. I'd like to show you a video. Do we have access to internet here? If we don't, it's not. Let's check. Okay, it really doesn't matter. Basically, the video was showing a patient in his bed who was speaking during sleep, and it seemed to be speaking and moving in his sleep as if he was protecting himself against some threat. And this is often something that patient and bed partner remind from what happened during sleep. Patients often feel like they are threatened during their sleep, and they punch or they kick against these threats.
We can easily get you the video because we've got the Wi-Fi. So if you want,
I think that's fine.
Yeah,
maybe in the end.
Everybody will be getting the slides anyway, so they'll need to watch it, yeah.
this is a series of different symptoms that can occur during REM sleep behavior disorder. You don't need to read them one by one. I want to highlight just a few of them. As you can see, about 1/5 of patients have already assaulted their bed partner, and bed partner have already been injured in about 1/5. It's definitely not to put the fault on the patient, of course, but it's just to underline that it's not an anecdotal disease. It can lead to injury. It's definitely not the fault of patients. Of course, it's not intentional, but it can have serious consequences. More than half of patients have already injured themselves. So it's very important to make sure that the environment is secured when patients suffer from this disease. That's actually probably the first line treatment in RBD, in REM sleep behavior disorder. Here are a couple of examples of abnormal behavior that patient can show during their sleep. For example, here, the co-sleeper, the bed partner, was describing the patient squatting on the bed, waving his arms as if flying, shouting "pimpon," which is the two-tone sound of a fire brigade, with a duck's voice. And the patient recalled that he was dreaming of being a police duck flying after a pigeon thief. This comes from a publication. In another dream, the bed partner described the patient sitting on the bed, rowing without paddles, shouting "help, caimans," getting hold of a heavy oak bedside table and throw it across the room. And the dream content was, "I'm on a canoe, attacked by caiman, trying to make them flee." I think there are two interesting things in this description. The first one is that the dream content usually fits with what the bed partner observes. So again, that's quite a good illustration that this behavior, this abnormal behavior and speech probably reflect the content of a dream. The other interesting thing to observe here is that patients seem to be able to do movement and to speak in a way that they are not able to during wakefulness. Like, for example, throwing a heavy oak bedside table during sleep seems to be quite impossible during wakefulness, even for me. And in this publication, the author compared what patients presented during sleep to what they were able to do during wakefulness. And what they observed is that, for example, this patient who was squatting on the bed was actually unable to squat and presented with a major slowing of movement while he was or she was awake. This patient that threw a heavy oak bedside table was actually even unable to carry it during wakefulness. Yeah?
I was just wondering whether an element of fear was involved then, because we're often stronger when we're frightened.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good observation. It could be the reason why during sleep these patients present a sort of increased strength. But there is also, and this was the claim of the paper, there is also a better fluidity in the movement and better expression on the face. It seems that several motor problems that patients suffer from during wakefulness are sort of improved during sleep, and we don't exactly know why. Yeah?
Is there any relationship between having REM sleep disorder at some stage and then having nightmares later on for DLB patients? For example, my husband had REM sleep disorder years before his diagnostic, and around the diagnostic period, he didn't have REM sleep disorder. But I wonder whether he might have nightmares now because he is not sleeping well. So, do you have any research on the relationship between REM sleep disorder and
nightmares? Not to my knowledge, at least not beyond the fact that these two disorders, nightmares and REM sleep behavior disorder, they co-occur in patients with DLB. But to my knowledge, I don't know if there is a statistical association between these two. I don't know if you, Rimona, you know more about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting what you described, that having the REM sleep behavior disorder years before. That's really common. Mm-hmm. And it often settles as well. It's one of the symptoms of DLB that doesn't necessarily get worse. But then you mentioned that his sleep is disrupted now. It could be nightmares, but it could be other causes.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
No, I was just wondering whether there was a study, a longitudinal study that
Whether REM sleep behavior disorder increase the risk of having nightmares.
later on, even when
Well,
the symptom is settled.
Should we do this study? Probably we would see that yes, it is the case, but the confounding factor would be that these patients actually suffer from dementia with Lewy body, which is itself associated with nightmares. So it would be difficult to disentangle which is which. Yes.
I can corroborate that phenomenon, but I'm wondering, you said that it was during the diagnostic period that he had the REM disorder before, presumably before he had medication.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether the medication itself suppresses that REM
No,
effect.
it was settled before the medication.
So
But
does
it's
that mean,
true.
so does that mean that the medication acts on one part of the symptoms rather than the whole thing, so that the nightmares do continue in some... In other words, there's a transformation of this REM disorder.
Because of the medication. Well, it's true that we have to be careful about medications, especially in patients with dementia with Lewy body, because some of them, such as antidepressants, they can worsen or they can even trigger REM sleep behavior disorder. So yeah, it's a difficult question, and it's also a very first step when we care about patients with dementia with Lewy body is to review all medications and make sure that there is no medication that are actually worsening the situation than helping the patient.
But we could come to it with the question and answer at the end. It's very really interesting.
How do we diagnose REM sleep behavior disorder? We need polysomnography. So patients spend a night in a sleep clinic or in a sleep lab with electrodes that record the electrical activity of the brain, record the breathing, record muscle activity, etc. Polysomnography is not readily available, and it's quite time-consuming, and it can be sometimes difficult for patients. So we try to develop screening tool for LBD. There's been a study that showed that this simple question is quite efficient in identifying patients that suffer from REM sleep behavior disorder. The question is, have you ever been told or suspected yourself that you seem to act out your dreams while asleep, for example, punching, flying your arms in the air, making running movement, etc.? And they asked patients, or they asked people, whether they present these symptoms, and then they try to corroborate them with the presence or not of RBD. What they found is that when a patient answers positively to that question, most of the time they suffer indeed from RBD, while when they answer no, most of the time they don't suffer from REM sleep behavior disorder. So it's quite a good first step to investigate the presence of REM sleep behavior disorder. What can we do about this? We have two sides in the treatment. First is medications, and I would say first is supportive measures, and second, medications. This is a picture that I took while on holiday 2 years ago in the south of England. There is a bed on top of the sky. This is definitely not a good idea. It's a little bit of a joke, but it's also to highlight the fact that securing the room is very important in the context of dementia with Lewy body. So the different supporting measures are make sure that the bed is close to the ground. You can even add a second mattress on the ground so that if patients wake up, not wake up, but if they stand during sleep, if they start to walk, at least patients will not fall on the ground and hurt themselves. It's also very useful to protect the corners of furniture with cushioning so that they don't again hurt themselves. Important to secure windows or doors as much as possible. And of course, it's important not to put anything harmful in the room or even in the kitchen if patients go out of the room and go into the kitchen. So securing sharp tools is also an important part of these supportive measures. Regarding treatment, and we discussed that briefly just before, We have some treatment that are definitely not useful and that can even worsen the situation. So it's always a balance between what we can expect in terms of benefit and what we can expect also in terms of worsening the situation. Antidepressants are typically a medication that can aggravate the situation. Medication that can help the situation is, I would say, first line melatonin and also clonazepam. Clonazepam is a benzodiazepine. It has some side effects, and that's probably why we often prefer to start with melatonin, and if it doesn't work, maybe switch to clonazepam. I'd like to give you a few words about insomnia in patients with DLB. I have 5 minutes, right? Rimona, but
Yeah, but I mean,
we have time. Okay.
yes.
You carry on.
Okay. So as I said, insomnia doesn't seem to be more frequent in patients with dementia with Lewy body than in the general population. Really surprising to me. But the causes are definitely different. What are the causes that you can identify in patients? Pain, hallucination, nocturia, among others. Those are different than what we see in the general population. So this should be screened and this should be cared accordingly. What can we do? Sleep hygiene is very important. It can be difficult to implement, and I will explain to you what is sleep hygiene, but it's definitely the first step when we care about patients with insomnia, whether they have dementia with Lewy body or not. This is a leaflet from the NHS. Don't try to read, it's too small. I'll show you here what are these different tips to improve sleep hygiene. One is no TV or screen before going to bed, because this will activate your brain. This will literally stop the production of a hormone, which is called melatonin, that is supposed to help you sleep. So no TV or screen before going to bed. Usually we say maybe 1 or 2 hours before going to bed. Ideally, stop looking at TV or screen. The bed is for sleeping. It's important that the brain makes the association between bed and sleep, and not bed and, for example, watching TV, for example. So that when we go to bed, we know it's for sleeping, and the brain knows it's for sleeping. Meditation can help. Reading a book, ideally not a book on a phone, for example, because again it has a light that can perturb your brain and prevent you from sleeping. No food late at night, because food can be stimulating. So if we eat too late at night, this will have an activating effect. Regularity of sleep-wake cycle, this is very important. It means that the timing of going to bed and the timing for awakening should be very regular across days, including weekends. This helps to have regular cycles, hormonal cycles, including hormonal cycles, to help sleep. Journaling and worries can also be helpful. I will add 2 tips that were not mentioned in this list. The first one is to take some daylight, especially in the morning, because again, this helps different hormones that are involved in sleep-wake cycle. And the second is to do some physical exercise, because again, it helps you, and it helps anyone to feel asleep at the end of the day to improve sleep quality. There are other measures to help patients with insomnia, and we can go through these different measures afterwards if you want. I didn't put them in the main presentation for the sake of time. Excessive daytime sleepiness, we said that it's much more frequent in patients with Lewy body. Again, the first step is to identify whether we have a cause for this excessive daytime sleepiness. Apnea can be a cause. It's very frequent in the general population as well as in patients with DLB, so this should definitely be screened because there are treatment against apnea. Sedating,
Explain what apnea is.
sorry, yeah.
This is one that people might know.
So apnea is when patients stop breathing while they sleep, or they decrease breathing sufficiently enough so that the oxygen decreases in the blood. And this apnea can last several tens of seconds. So it's like if you were stopping breathing during tens of seconds several times a day, it definitely affects the quality of sleep. It's associated with excessive daytime sleepiness, and the treatment is to put a mask on the nose or on the nose and mouth that sends some air to keep the airways open so that breathing is regular and continuous across night, and it generally improves daytime sleepiness.
Can I ask a follow-up? Are there any clues that people, because I think people might think, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm having that. Are there any symptoms or clues that their bed partners might notice if they were having?
Absolutely, yeah. Snoring is one of them. Snoring is definitely a symptom that should raise the suspicion of apnea. It's also very frequent in the general population, so it's not, the overlap is not 100%, but it should raise your suspicion. Whether the bed partner has noticed apnea, so notice simply the fact that sometimes the bed partner stops breathing is very suspicious as well. And also when someone wakes up with the impression that he or she is lacking air, this is also a suspicious sign. And then excessive daytime sleepiness is also something that is very much associated with apnea. It can also raise the blood pressure, so well, there's an association between these two, so it's also important to take care of apnea for this reason. Sedating treatment can be associated with excessive daytime sleepiness, especially when these treatments have a half-life that lasts beyond sleep. And I'm thinking about benzodiazepine, for example. So again, reviewing all treatment is very important to make sure that there are no treatments that are actually inducing excessive daytime sleepiness. And of course, insomnia can definitely be associated with excessive daytime sleepiness. What can we do? Again, sleep hygiene is a first-line treatment. This can be sometimes difficult to implement, and of course, if we give all this list to patients and we tell them, do this and you will feel better, I think no one can follow every single of these different advices. I do not follow them myself. But I try to do my best. And I think that's the message we should give to patients, and I'm trying to give you, is to do as much as you can to have a good sleep hygiene so that you can improve as much as possible the quality of your sleep. There are some stimulants that we can give to patients. I would probably not start with stimulants with the very first meeting. I'm thinking about modafinil or armodafinil, which are medications that decrease daytime sleepiness. But I would probably start with thinking about this medication, this sleep hygiene, or if secondary cause for excessive daytime sleepiness have not solved the problem. A few take-home messages. The first step when we care about patients with dementia with Lewy body is probably to review medications and make sure that there are no medications that are worsening the situation. This is also true for REM sleep behavior disorder, or for insomnia, or for excessive daytime sleepiness. Sleep disorders are really important in patients with dementia with Lewy body. They can have quite a burden on sleep quality, on quality of life, on patients and on their families, so it's important to screen for them and treat them as much as possible. Sleep hygiene is one of the first-line treatment when we care about patients with sleep disorders, especially in patients with dementia with Lewy body. The advice would be to implement them as much as possible to improve sleep quality. So with this, I'm finished.
What I thought we'll do is we're going to bring in John and Phil. I think you've got you've got the questions. Brilliant. Should I act as chair? Although I noticed that you've got questions, but you've probably got slides. You're the most.
What you've got.
Yeah, I take.
Okay, we've had some. The IT was reset over the weekend, which is why there've been. It's like kind of ducks. You can't tell swans. You can't tell, but there's been all sorts of IT sorting
I'm
out.
not quite sure who
You're
it
a
was.
swan.
I'm not quite sure who it was reset for, but it certainly wasn't me today.
So what I'm going to do is, if I could ask John, it's not me, no, John and Phil, and actually, could I first of all ask you to introduce yourself, John? Tell us a bit about you, and Phil as well. You've got a microphone.
Good morning, I'm John. I've been diagnosed with Lewy bodies for 5 years. Prior to that, I was an engineer in white goods, and I gave up work purely because of the diagnosis of Lewy bodies and Guillain-Barré at the same time.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Phil. I think I want to start with an apology to all bed sharers. Last thing my wife said to me before I left wasn't good luck or anything. It was just tell them how bad it is for me. I was a registered nurse in intensive care, critical care, and an academic for almost 40 years. And I stopped working in November of last year. Following a diagnosis of Lewy body dementia in 2021.
So, do you know what, I'm going to borrow your microphone. Thank you for coming. So, shall we start with John? Can you tell us what sleep changes you've noticed?
Mostly a lot of nightmares. In my sleep, and you just said what changes have I noticed? You mean changes in sleep?
Yes.
Yeah. Nightmares, a lot of moving around, kicking about, talking in the sleep, all to do with my nightmares.
Thank you.
They're the main things.
Brilliant, thank you. Phil.
I think probably the big differences are in relation to enacting things out. And I would want to say the descriptions sometimes aren't always accurate. I don't know if you could turn into a superhuman being in a sleep state, but apparently I have no recollections of some of these things. Mm-hmm. I can actually leap, and that is a genuine description by my wife, leap out of bed, hurtle across the room and do things, whereas, you know, most of the time I stagger, slowly walk or whatever. So when you put up about the throwing the cabinet, I thought, oh yes, that's definitely it. Our house, I collect, I like antiques, so I've had to move a lot of things from the bedside and from around the bedroom. And I was going to say to Rimona, say about the bed, because I used to collect military arms. They've had to go because my wife said no, you know, who knows? And the interesting thing is I'm not sure about nightmares, because it doesn't have to be a nightmare. I don't always remember, although my wife says you've been running a lot, and she wakes up and she has bruises over her arms, over her legs, because I apparently have been running somewhere. I don't know if I'm running away, but I don't remember the sensation of fear or necessarily running away.
Did you ever fall out of bed? Just going to repeat that. So Jenny asked, just in case people didn't hear, did you ever fall out of bed?
Could I take it back a little bit further and say, did I used to sleepwalk? The answer is yes. And that's what I'm a little bit fascinated by, and I'd love to ask more questions, because I have always had some of these problems. Love to do longitudinal studies about whether or not there's a link between people who found themselves wandering.
Since how many years have you been presenting with sleepwalking?
I'm only 26 now. You know, it's almost, you know, I could almost say at least 30 years.
30 years.
And what you must understand is sleepwalking is only when you're found. So, you know, it's possible I go and come back to bed. So,
Yeah. Well, so sleepwalking is what we call parasomnia. REM sleep behavior disorder is also parasomnia, but of two different sleep stages. And yeah, well, they can occur in the same person. Now, the thing is that I absolutely believe you if you say that you have been found elsewhere during sleep, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have been experiencing sleepwalking in terms of medical condition. We would need to do some sleep studies to make sure it was sleepwalking, and not in fact the very first sign of REM sleep behavior disorder. That can, you probably know that can start many years before the actual diagnosis of dementia with Lewy bodies.
the answer to your question is yes. So, when the children were small, we had stairgates.
So you're using that now, are you?
Let's put it this way. When the grandchildren, we have a grandson who is two and a half, so when he comes to stay, I think the stairgate won't be taken away. But then, of course, it's the hazard of height. Yeah. So there are all of those issues.
Brilliant. So you've talked about some of the safety stuff. I have never in clinic been asking people about putting away knives and bayonets. So I will actually, because if you don't talk about it, then it doesn't happen. So I will make a point of that now. But beyond that, I wanted to ask you and also reflect with Laurent, or Dr. Sheybani, whether any things that you found that have helped, either helped for your partner or helped with your sleep with these symptoms. John first.
Really, I suppose it's going back to your list of sleep. It's really modifying my day to take advantage of going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time, eating at the same time, obviously taking the medication at the same time every day, making sure I do get, I'm going to say sunlight, but daylight, and also some exercise.
Yeah.
And if I can, then I like to give myself little jobs that I feel like it. And nothing to do with like saying, oh, I'll do a bit of the housework or anything like that.
Nicholas shaking her head.
Something that I want to do for myself. Like a couple of weeks ago, I took apart a slat and bench, and that put together a couple of years prior to that, and decided that I'd just rub it down and re-oil it. But it took me a week just to do 9 slats. But I won't.
John, can I ask you how difficult it was to start these sleep hygiene measures that you described?
It was quite difficult. Nicholas pointed to hers. I mean, she helps a great deal, with reminders and what have you. So she's been a real big help in that. Once I've got into it, it's quite natural now.
Okay.
My hallucinations tend to be daytime hallucinations, so at night it is mostly what you might call. In the early on, they were what I'd call real nightmares, horrific. But nowadays, they're not so much nightmares as what I'd call odd dreams. Not.
Did you want to comment on hallucinations?
To my knowledge, sleep hygiene would not have an impact on hallucinations. I can't recall a study that.
Not directly. The only thing is that the hallucinations, one of the first things you do is increase the light. So if you're going to put all the lights on, then that's going to wake you up. So that's the only challenging thing. Hallucinations, they often happen for people at the same time of day in the same place, and it's often in the evening. So it's not surprising that Chris was getting them in the bedroom, particularly in the evening. And then it would be medications, which we will have tried. So rivastigmine, donepezil, and then it gets more challenging after that. I suppose quetiapine, which is sort of one of the first line treatments, can help with sleep. But yeah, hallucinations can be really challenging, especially if they're distressing and if people don't want to go to the bedroom because they're worried about the people that are in there.
I just would want to say, most of my hallucinations I've found occur either in the early morning or the evening, and it's certainly to do with light. So I find that now, as we head towards the lighter nights, if I'm going to bed at the same time, at 9 o'clock, I'm more prone to the hallucinations later in the evening when I'm going to bed. So I might be then slightly more alert because of the fact I'm seeing things. So that trying to reduce the stress can sometimes be hampered by the light. So that was all I just wanted to say.
Brilliant. The next question I was going to ask you, we will open up as well to more questions, was about, we talked about the REM sleep behaviour disorder, but also the insomnia. So I wondered, John, have you had difficulty either falling asleep or waking up frequently in the night? And which of those was an issue for you?
My regime is normally to go to bed about 10 o'clock and read for around an hour or so. But then I can find that I don't actually go to sleep, and I'll be awake until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Then when I eventually go to sleep, I may then wake up around about 4 o'clock. And after that, I'll then go to sleep again until my wife wakes me from a medication at 7:15. But I'll always then go back to sleep again after that, normally for anywhere between 1 and 4 hours. So, it's, I don't know whether the extra sleep after medication breakfast at 7:15 makes up for what I've lost earlier. But my day after that seems pretty good.
Seems good.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Phil?
Can you remind me of the question?
Any difficulty falling asleep, or once you're asleep, waking up in the night?
I dread going to sleep.
Why?
I dread because I know that going to sleep is actually, there's 2 elements to it. One, I know that my legs will start. I start running, and I'm awake when this starts. No matter how, as I go off into the land of slumber, I can't control my legs. They want to run. So I dread it going to sleep. I take the melatonin. That helped initially, doubled the dose. I'd hoped it might have double the impact, but it didn't. So I find that I don't go to sleep very quickly anymore. So that's difficult. So I'm awake into the early hours of the morning, perhaps 1, 2 o'clock. And I'm finding that the melatonin tends to make me a little bit more groggy in the morning when I eventually wake up. But I do feel as though I'm getting a deeper sleep. And since having the melatonin, I do believe that I'm actually rested, and that's different. I think there's a huge difference between going to bed and going to sleep, and actually going to bed, sleeping, but feeling, oh yeah, actually, I feel as though I'm a little bit less foggy. I do feel less foggy from that perspective. But there's also a bit about dread of going to bed and the impact upon my poor wife. You know, we try different things, like she goes to bed slightly later. And at the weekend, I'm going to say, we slept in different beds. It was twin, we were away for the weekend. And the hotel, we happened to have twin beds. And she, as soon as we walked in the room, she said, "It's nothing to do with me, I didn't order this." And I thought, we said, you know, well, that might be quite, let's see how it goes. Because she was still in the same room with me. So that bit was quite useful. Did she sleep any better? Well, she said, "You couldn't touch me." And that I think made a difference. So it wasn't, you know, that disturbance. So, you know.
Yeah, so it's both a difficulty falling asleep, and then there are many awakenings during the night. The sleep hygiene is one part of the treatment for insomnia, and then there is what we call cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That works, in fact, very good in the general population. It's also indicated in patients with dementia with Lewy body. When there are too much cognitive deficits, it can be difficult to do, and it's quite demanding for anyone, but it can be very effective. On the short term at least. On the long term, it really depends on how much patients are following the indication of GPs and neurologists. But at least on the short term, it can be a very effective treatment. And then there is also a new molecule that is called Quidivik, daridorexant, for insomnia. It has been approved in the last 3 years, I think, in the UK. And this is a molecule that can also help insomnia. Okay.
Can you get it on the NHS?
I think even GP can prescribe it.
Okay.
What is it?
Can you repeat it?
Quidivik, well, I think I have a slide on it.
How does it work?
It's a molecule that acts on the receptor for orexin,
Great.
and it's a dual antagonist here, the Quidivik daridorexant. According to the study, it doesn't have much side effect. I think main were headaches, I think, and I don't remember the second one.
Does it work with initial insomnia, so people falling asleep, or is it for people who wake up frequently in the night?
I think they included both.
The reason I ask that is that initial insomnia is relatively less common than DLB, and what's more common is people falling asleep okay, but then waking up on them. So it'll be interesting, presumably they haven't done the trial yet in DLB. That would be interesting to see in this.
Yeah.
So we're together for the next hour and 10 minutes, I think. So the plan is, Esther is going to kick off with some news and to sort of share what she's been doing, setting up the Lewy body network. Then we're going to hear from Karen from Tapson about the monthly peer support groups and sort of accessing local support as well. And actually I've already heard while we were at lunch about people they wanted to actually setting up new local support group through GP surgeries, which is amazing. So it's very exciting to see grassroots people actually opening up and setting up support. And then we're going to close with, we've given you a whole half hour, Charles. Here you are. We've given you a whole half hour, so I can't wait to hear the news you're going to share. Talk really slowly, show us pictures. I suppose we could do some questions if there are any sort of towards the end.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And some of you have already told us ideas for next time as well, which our next meeting is in November. Is it December? December 2nd. Okay. Brilliant. It's in my diary. But yes, I'm sure it is. We'll work it out. So if you have ideas, some of you have already come forward and given us ideas, which is great. And if you have ideas, we'd love to hear. So, I am delighted to welcome Esther. I've known Esther for quite a long time. Esther Boyd's husband, Howard, was diagnosed with DLB in March, I suppose it was long ago, it was March 2011, after having a DAT scan. And you've been coming to our meetings, Esther, since they started in 2018. I think there's only one that you've missed. So everything, and I'm not going to count that against you. I've learned a great deal from Esther. And a particularly memorable thing that I've learned from you is we had a session early on about a type of delusion that people can have where they have a fixed idea that their partner is about strategies for that. And I hope you don't mind me saying that you had a brilliant strategy, which was that you'd say, oh, Esther's not here, and you'd say, and you'd leave the room and come back. And it's such a brilliant strategy that I don't tell people it's you, but I am there. I learned a great deal from that strategy. Howard sadly died in October 2019. And since then, you've continued to work, I think, even harder in the Lewy body dementia community. She set up a Lewy body group with encouragement from an occupational therapist in the rare dementia service in Birmingham. And apparently he suggested the name. I always thought this was your idea, but you're crediting him. And he stressed the importance of communication by phone and also by real snail mail, not just by email. And he was the one who told you about our first support group meeting in December 2019. You're a retired architect, an active Quaker, a socialist, a cyclist, and a flautist, and you live in Birmingham. And you're going to tell us about the work that you've been doing with the Lewy Body Buddy Group. Thank you, Esther.
So I haven't been told how to work this.
Oh,
Okay, so it's that. So hello everybody. I'm a bit nervous, I confess. It's a long time since I have done any public speaking. And so I may revert to reading my notes. I hope you'll bear with me and forgive me for that. So, the Lewy Buddy Support Network UK is run by two highly motivated part-time volunteers, and that's me and Rich James. And Rich lives in Devon, and he cares for his mother who has Lewy body dementia, and I live in Birmingham, and as Rimona said, my husband Howard died in 2019. And we now have over 150 people on our mailing list and about 450 on our Facebook group. And it's our plan to become registered as a CIO, a charitable incorporated organisation. And all trustees will have lived experience of the disorder. After the meeting, you will receive an electronic copy of these slides with my notes from RDS, but if you would prefer a paper copy, please ask me. So we are here for each other. That was Rich's phrase, and I think it's brilliant. But it was a long journey for me to get to the point of meeting up with Rich last year. So Howard was diagnosed in 2011, and we were for 5 years on our own. We met many people living with other dementias, but their lives were very different. We didn't meet anybody with Lewy bodies. And our first Lewy buddies we met in 2016 through the Alzheimer's Society online forum. And the couple lived 45 miles away from us in Birmingham. But as soon as we met, we were banned from the forum because that's against the rules. So we had a long time and very good times together, but it was just this one couple who lived 45 miles away, and sadly the husband died. So I designed and printed simple flyers asking people to get in touch with me, and two local couples got in touch with me in early 2018, and then the first meeting of this group was in December 2018. And I met a few contacts, buddy contacts, at that meeting, and Jamie's here today, still in touch, so that's great. RDS used to facilitate buddy contacts for all rare dementias through their membership database, but this has evolved now into peer support groups with members making their own personal contacts. After Howard died in 2019, I started this support group for Buddies, Lewy Buddies UK. And the details were widely spread by admin nurses, and soon I had buddies in all over the UK, Edinburgh, Penzance, Cheshire, Suffolk, as well as Birmingham and London. And this group provided online and telephone support, mostly with me, but I did get some buddies to meet up separately on their own. It was in 2020, after his mother's diagnosis, that Rich started a private Facebook group, which he called the Lewy Body Support Network UK. In 2021, I started co-hosting monthly LBD support groups on Zoom with Roberta from RDS, and these are still happening, and Karen now hosts 2 more support groups on Zoom. And last year, I joined forces with Rich, and Rich created the website, and we're now known as the Lewy Buddy Support Network UK, but this may change again. This is a screenshot of the website. Perhaps I should just have this in water. So, what we are hoping and intending to do is provide peer support after diagnosis. As peers, not professionals, we complement the professional support that's provided by RDS. Because buddies are experts by experience on the challenges of living with a Lewy body disorder, 24/7. Very different from professionals. For professional support, we do work with others, as well as RDS. We work with Dementia Carers Count, Parkinson's UK, and Dementia UK. Sadly not with the Lewy Body Society. But if in our work we find that there are safeguarding issues, immediately advice will be sought from other agencies. So, Lewy Buddies is all about sharing experiences. And we have shared experiences on the website, what worked for me series, but also we've started to have some bite-sized tips which you can look at, and if you think of any more, I hope you will let us know. And if you would like to write a what worked for me article, that would be great. My first article was about rapid cycling. This is all about exercise. As Rimona said, exercise is so important. And the rapid cycling actually reversed several symptoms for my husband, and the improvements lasted for 2 years. I just wish I'd heard about it earlier. And I've now started to work with Parkinson's UK to try and make rapid cycling more available for people. So we think that part of peer support is ensuring that buddies have good information in plain English. And I'm having discussions with Rimona about this. Well, I'll come back to that. So, Lewy bodies are not widely known. There are, sadly, few centres of excellence. Obviously, Queen Square is one of these centres of excellence. But generally, there's a lack of understanding about the wide range of symptoms which are caused by this condition and other characteristics of this type of dementia. So, we filled a few gaps in this information in plain English. But this slide highlights an issue because professionals sometimes have different opinions. Lewy buddies who have checked, people here who have checked our website already, may notice that the left-hand side of this diagram differs from the version in our quick guide to Lewy bodies. I was asked by Rimona to change this slide, and I was happy to do so. I will get in touch with the people who advised me about this previously. I didn't put it up without checking, but they weren't as expert in Lewy bodies as Rimona is.
I'm not that much of an expert.
Well,
It's just about what you include. Yeah. This is correct. So.
Okay. So, last year I attended an online dementia carers count event about LBD and Parkinson's, and I was asked to speak at their next event. And then Lorraine, who's pictured there, was a specialist practitioner, and I created a 25-minute video for International Lewy Body Day in January, and that's available online. It was well received, and I recommend it for family and friends. So this is our Lewy Body map. It's an interactive map, and the red flags show carers, and the green flags show people with a diagnosis. And when you have it on your screen, you can click on a point, and it gives you the details of somebody, and I don't know if it's properly legible, but this is me, Esther B, in the West Midlands, B13. I'm a bereaved carer of my spouse. Stage of diagnosis for me obviously isn't applicable, but for other people it's early, which means people are still independent, middle, which means that they need support, and late, which means that they need constant care. So that you can look at the directory and see which people have the same sort of lived experience as you, so that you can get in touch with them. Before gaining access to the directory, buddies have agreed to follow rules, which is a basic code of contact to keep everyone safe. So our aim at the moment is to enable buddies to get into contact with one another. My original vision for buddies during Howard's lifetime was to encourage the creation of local regional groups, which I hoped would be self-sustaining. Things have moved on since then. Since 2019, I've been a member of the RDS Regional Facilitators Group, which is led by Roberta, who sadly couldn't be here today, and she coordinates regional groups for all rare dementias, and RDS plans to expand these groups, working with local health professionals. I will add here that I'm pleased that RDS supports LBD, but I expect everybody here knows that LBD really isn't rare. But it's still wonderful that it is supported, because it's a challenging diagnosis. Jenny Tomlinson runs, who is here, there's Jenny, yes. She runs the only purely RDS Lewy Body dementia group, and her group's in Bedfordshire. The Zooms, the RDS LBD Zoom groups cover the whole country. And if there is scope for developing local LBD groups, I will do that, obviously, in consultation with RDS. So once people have got into the buddy directory, they can fill in contact request form, and you can choose somebody nearby simply by, as I showed, clicking on the flag on the map, or you can look at the list and find a buddy who's caring for their spouse or a parent at home or in a care home. Obviously these are all different experiences which people might like to, and of course, like John and Phil, have the diagnosis themselves. I'm very proud that I introduced the two of them to each other. And another thing people can do is ask which buddies might have experience of particular things, problems that they have, like early onset LBD, or use of incontinence aids, or applying for CHC funding. You can get buddies' opinions on these. And then we check with the buddies, and if both sides agree, you're introduced and it's over to you. And we've had good feedback. This is a superb service, very safe and very supportive was one. Another one is, I thoroughly recommend this. I now have a local buddy to meet up with, and it is so helpful. I don't have to put on a brave face, and we can talk about what it's really like. Also, it's a very lonely place being a carer, and having the chance to talk with someone who is in the same position puts everything into perspective. So the mutual support from sharing experiences with buddies really increases people's self-confidence. And buddies can take that control. You can find out from other people what should be available for you. And so when the clinician or a GP or social services say no, you can say, I don't take no for an answer. This can be provided, and you can get what really will help you. So that's it. Please join us if you haven't already. You can either join the buddy directory, or you can just get on the mailing list for the moment. And we have printed flyers which could be helpful for you if you'd like to find local buddies. And if you would like to do that, just stay behind afterwards. I've got time to talk to you and give you some flyers to meet up with people locally, as I did to begin with in Birmingham. Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Sian next. So, I'm thrilled that you agreed to speak. I have had a preview of some of the things that you're going to show us, and this is really very special. Chris and Sian have been married for 43 years. You'll have me to say it. Great. So Chris was a high-achieving games player and thoroughly enjoyed his long and successful teaching career. He taught PE and history. He was a mountain leader, a parish counsellor, a cathedral guide, and an avid reader. And things started to go wrong for him around 15 years ago, and Sian and Chris struggled for a long time to find out why. I've heard this story quite a lot this morning. He became more and more anxious during this time, and he lost his ability to do things that had been so easy for him before. And he was forced to retire. His GP treated him for depression, and then he started to develop hallucinations in 2019, and that's when he was referred to the mental health services. And again, it's a journey to get to the diagnosis, which is very familiar, I think, to everybody. Eventually, it was confirmed during the lockdown pandemic that the diagnosis was dementia because of the Lewy bodies, and he deteriorated quite rapidly after that. During that time, you found rare dementia support, and you watched the online seminars, and you asked GPs, and then you got referred to us at UCL. I remember meeting you in my clinic in 2021, and what Sian said, and I think this is, I feel quite emotional actually thinking about this, but he said that the following 2 years were about acceptance and about making the most of what you can. And I think that's a really important message. I even talked about this with somebody today at lunch about life is for living, doing the things and making sure that you do all those things, create those memories and do those events that you need to do. Sian cared for Chris at home without very much help from local professionals, and he did extremely well until August 2023, and then he reached a tipping point. So Chris has since then been awarded continuing care funding, and I think through your Sian's tenacity, and he's about to be moved to a nursing home. Although I think he's now he's about to be moved to a nursing home.
Any minute.
Any minute. Hopefully not any minute. So Sian has your mother is 98, and she decided that she wanted to arrange a fundraising musical concert to raise funds and awareness, I think, for about Lewy body dementia. And she asked if there was anything that would be helpful to support. So I suggested that if you wanted to raise some funds, that there's a new blood biomarker that you might have read about in the newspapers that we were keen to test, and so she suggested that she would raise some funds for that. And we held the concert on the 13th of April, and it was an absolute tremendous success. And you're going to tell us all about it and share some photographs. Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, 43 years, it sounds nearly 44 actually. It sounds awful when it's said by somebody else. First of all, I hope you like the title, Something Positive Out of a Tragedy. You don't know what it is yet, but that is it. I thought of that because I do like to try and find positives in every situation, even if you don't think there is one. Also, I am very, very well aware that everyone with a diagnosis has a different experience, so I am talking about our experience. Also, I'm not sure about my own emotions. I might cry at one point. If I do, I don't care, so you mustn't care either. I've got a tissue just in case. And I might not. And I might cry at a bit that I'm quite surprised at. We'll have to see. So to help you understand what I'm talking about, I need you to look at this picture. This is my family. Obviously you know me. There's my son with, so I should say our son with dog and his wife at the back. Then our two grandchildren, and at the front is my daughter, our daughter, and her wife, her husband. So they are intrinsic to this story. Also, it's also intrinsic because they live nowhere near us. They live 200 miles away in opposite directions to each other and to me. Southwest, northwest, southeast. So, although we are one, we all agree about everything we do with Chris. They can be of very little practical help, and that's important to what I say in a minute. Bear with me, it does make sense. So, dementia. We often think of loss from the perspective of the dementia sufferer, and so we should. But there's also more to it than that. There's loss of a grandpa, loss of her dad, and also loss of her husband. He would have been great in the garden playing football at the weekend like I did at my grandson's 10th birthday. He wasn't there. Next slide. This is my particular loss. This is a family holiday of 2022, I think. This, my biggest loss is the outdoor life, because as Rimona mentioned, Chris was an outdoor leader and a PE teacher, and he lived his life outdoors. He was a fabulous driver. He took me to every single nook and cranny and barren part of this country. And he was a brilliant map reader, and he planned the walks. So I really miss that bit of it, personally. I'm sure he does. I miss it dreadfully. This was when he could hardly walk. But we're outdoors, in the middle of nowhere, because I bought a powered wheelchair. what we were saying about acceptance and making the most of it. I know it's not a cheap item, but it was a freedom chair, an outdoor machine, and we just took him out. We were out on the moors. He couldn't dress himself at this point either, but you can't tell looking at that photograph. You think that was the Chris of 10 years ago. So we then move on to this lady. This is my mother, 98 and a half. Very significant for this story. She has a loss too. She's known Chris since Chris was 21, and he's now 72. He took her to hospital appointments, he took her on holidays, he mowed the grass, he did all the things that son-in-laws who live locally do. And she loved him. She still loves him. But she feels helpless because there's nothing she can do to help him, there's nothing she can do to help me. And she suffers from that loss. She's not your ordinary 98-and-a-half-year-old. She's a bit like the late Queen, she's a bit like David Attenborough. She wanted to do something to help. So last October, she announced to my brother and my sister that she wanted to arrange a concert. She can't see either, this lady, but anyway, she wanted to arrange a concert. And at the time, she wanted to raise awareness of Lewy body, and she thought she'd raise a little bit of money for some research. So, as she's not the ordinary 98-year-old, it worked. She did it. She arranged it. It involved the most important things in her life, which are family, church, music and poetry. They were her things. She asked, she telephoned, she wrote. You have to see her writing to believe it. But she did those things. She wrote to all those that she wanted to take part in the concert. And everybody said yes. Everyone said yes because you probably all heard in this room people say, "Oh, tell me if there's anything I can do to help." My mum was saying, "Can you help me with this concert to raise this awareness?" And people all said yes. She had an aim to raise £1,000. She thought, if I get 100 people coming to a concert and they give £10 each, that will be fine. I informed UCL and I asked Rimona about of our intentions of raising money, and as usual got amazing, fantastic, helpful support. I asked Rimona to, oh, you phoned me, didn't you, actually? I keep looking over there. I asked you where you'd like money to go to, and we had a telephone call, and she said, "Can I have it?"
You gave me a choice. I said, "You've got something we could do with it."
I said, yes, please.
I didn't say that.
Well, you know what I mean. I know what I mean. I'm delighted. No, that's because that's what I wanted you to say. So I was delighted. So then my family then, because my mother is so old, she couldn't do a lot of the organisation herself, but it definitely was her concert. But the family then assumed important roles. And I mean assumed. Nobody was really asked to do anything. We just slotted into what we had to do. My brother, I'll show you a picture of him in a minute, my brother was appointed a compere, pretty good he was too. My sister produced a programme. The grandchildren gave out the programme on the evening. My daughter and son-in-law were to manage all the donations, gift aid, contactless payments, cash, the accounting. My son and my daughter-in-law were to perform and to accompany, and I was to perform in my little choir. I was to do the programme order, I was to coordinate, because I was a local one, to troubleshoot. And probably more important of all of those, I would be giving an address about Lewy body dementia to raise awareness. So let's just show you. It's my brother. Can't see any family resemblance at all there, can you? It's my brother being a compere, and he's actually looking up because, well, I'll get on to it, but the church is packed. And he's looking up at people who we had to find extra room for. And on the far slide, my sister and the two grandchildren, who are not twins, but they look like them. The church community, my mother's been a member for 60 years, the church community were amazing. I think it's because they love my mum, but they also know me, and hopefully some of them love me too, but they really did take on roles without being told twice. They volunteered to perform. They volunteered to manage the building, the chairs. They ran the sound system. They took on the refreshments. They donated wine. And the treasurer took on the charge of dealing with the donations and getting gift aid. They were so happy to be able to help. We didn't have one single penny of expenses. The concert itself, I would say, was a phenomenal success. Here are some photographs of that concert. That's me in the middle. This is my, I sing in two choirs. I sing in Hertfordshire Chorus, which is keeps me going. I've done that all through Chris's condition. I have had my choir, and it's sacrosanct, and people have sat with him so I could do that. And this is a little spin-off from that choir. This is a little charity group of friends. We're all linked to the Hertfordshire Chorus, but we just do 2 charity concerts a year and love singing together. So we sang, we opened and we closed the concert. My mum and I, the two local ones to the church. So we used our social network, and nearly 300 people came to the concert. 300 is quite a lot of people. They were even queuing to come into the building. At 7:20, my sister said, "They're queuing out onto the road to get in here." You know, it was just amazing. And because of that unexpected number of people, the buzz in the church was so, you could feel it, and the love and the excitement, it was really tangible. Jenny was there.
Very good.
Yes.
Brilliant.
So it was a good job we didn't advertise. That's what we think. Because I don't know what we've done. We couldn't get another person in. They came because they loved my mum, or they loved Chris, or they loved me. And they came because they could help. They gave so generously. They we all raised over £6,000. It was such a happy night, and I think that's the thing, you know, that's why it's something positive out of a tragedy. It was such a happy night. Here are some other performers. This is King's Breakfast. And on the far side, 3 little maids from the Mikado. The two on the other side, on each side, are sisters. The lady in the middle, Helen, she's my best friend, and she's wearing Chris's school tie, which I thought was quite nice. I gave her that to her. So they were very funny. What else have we got? Oh, that's me. And I do actually think it was a good thing to do, because as my mum said, she wanted to raise awareness. I wanted to raise awareness. So I did write that down, and I didn't pull any punches, and I did, again, I got a lot of my information for that from from coming here. And yeah, I was all right, wasn't I?
You were
Thank you.
You really explained it clearly.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it was a very happy night. This young man is a professional tenor who was a friend of my mum's. She'd given him a lot of her music that she didn't need anymore. On the other side there we have my son, daughter-in-law. They were fantastic. They are actually professional musicians, but not at what they did on that night. My son is a drummer, and Lucy is a pianist and a composer. Not many women composers. But they were performing out of their comfort zone. But I really like them. I watched them a lot on there because we recorded the concert, and I watched that bit a lot. Yes, they were very good. They sang things like Girl from Tennessee and Yellow Taxi, Joni Mitchell.
It was quite a diverse programme actually, but I have to honestly say the standard was very high.
It was stunning, wasn't it?
It was a really good evening.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yes, it was.
I had a lot of friends there as well. Some of them
Yeah.
known Sian, and we all said what a very good concert it was.
It was very good. And my mum sang in it. I don't think we had a picture of that. We haven't got a picture of her singing. But the church choir sang, we sang, and down by the riverside, and we sang the Lord's Prayer from African Sanctus, and my son did a drum solo in the middle of that. So he accompanied us for that.
I must honestly say, I was most impressed with Sian's mother at 98 and a half. She's there now, standing and thanking people. I was blown away by her.
Yeah.
She really was so with it and so good, strong personality, really was.
So at the end of the concert, just before the end, my brother called her up to the front and to say she was the producer, she had the idea. There she is with her stick. She did actually talk to the congregation, she did the audience. Really said what I said about love and support. Nobody said no, everybody said yes. I know I started the standing ovation, but they didn't have to follow me, did they? And look at everybody's face. That's what I mean about it being happy. Every single person there has a smile on their face. I don't think I've got anything else to say, really. Only that we reached our target of £1,000. We reached our target of raising awareness. We reached our target of having a fun evening. We were walking on air for at least a fortnight, at least. And it just gave everybody an opportunity to help. We said over these last years, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I know that Rimona was very humble, but I don't know what we'd have done without. It's been hard enough with UCL and Rimona and Nikki. It's been hard enough. I cannot imagine what it's like to do this without them. You're just so approachable, understanding, non-judgmental, and you're just wonderful. And so right to be giving something back. It just feels right. So well done, thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
So, Karen, 25 years, I've been told. Sounds like a prison sentence. Karen has been providing peer support for people with dementia for 25 years. I mean, can we just do a clap for that? You must have been 2 years old. So Karen's going to give us an update on the peer support group, and it's people with Lewy bodies and their carers, and really to tell us what's available in the community. So
Thank you so much, Aaron. Is that right?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Sian, thank you. But remind me in the future never to follow at all. That was wonderful and beautiful. So, yes, we're going to have 15 minutes looking at our peer support that we've actually got here at Weil Dementia Support. So thank you very much for that introduction. It was lovely. So, I guess the first thing to say is that we've got 20 peer support groups that we run a month now. You know, it really is growing, you know, such a lot.
And I think when we talk about, you know, the context of having 6,500 members and the different support groups and the different needs from people, and, you know, we started off talking about, we started buddying, which was really good in COVID times and lockdown, you know, we couldn't get out and do things, and then it quickly grew. And, you know, Claire does some of the peer support groups, I do some, Karen does some, but this group's really, really such a special group, isn't it, that you've managed sort of to develop over time, and it's listening to people about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched the Carers Peer Support Group, which runs on the second Wednesday of every month, and it's for 90 minutes at 11 a.m. And it's so proud to say we've got a few of our members here today as well, and they've been really influential of the carers meeting and the person living with group about the content we're going to be sharing with you today. So at the moment we're just running one carers group, but the plan is that that will split into two. So people that have recently been diagnosed will have one of the team supporting them, and then for those carers that are supporting a loved one to those moderate to later stages, another member of the team will host that carer support group. And then we have the Living With, which is a very special group, and that runs on the second Monday of every month. And Nikki always says to me, you love Mondays so much, and it's because of all
the only person that loves Mondays.
Because we run all of our Living With peer support groups on Monday, and this is an all-men group, you know, very special. Again, lots of our lovely members that attend that group are here today as well, and that's via Zoom, and that's for 90 minutes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the groups? What do you talk about in the groups?
Yes, well...
is that a secret? We're not breaking any confidentiality here. Well, there's any sort of topics that come up along.
Yeah, I'm going to come to those in a minute, because what I want to say, first of all, is that they are confidential meetings. It is a safe space, whether you're caring or you're living with. So sometimes it can be a bit hard for you, because we're quite strict on timekeeping, and we ask you to be by yourself in the meeting, because those things are really, really important. And actually, I'm going to go back one stage, because not everybody just gets to turn up at a peer support group.
Absolutely not. That's our safety thing first.
Exactly. You mentioned safety, and that's really important to us. You sign up to be a member of RDS, and then I'll arrange to have a support call with you. So we'll, you know, check with you around your diagnosis, where you've got your diagnosis, the symptoms you're experiencing, and share with you, if you're living with, what goes on in the group. So we'll get to that in a second. If you're caring for, we'll ask the same sort of questions. So we make sure the groups are a good fit for you, because that's absolutely important for them to work as well as they do.
I think as well it's really important with the safety thing is talking about making sure anybody's not got a big major unmet need sort of within the group, sort of, you know, that bomb drops suddenly in the middle of a discussion. We perhaps need a bit of a conversation outside the group for that. So we try and preempt that before people come to the groups, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes what you bring might be too big for that group. They can't hold it. So then we're all trained to say, let's take that outside of this meeting, and we can arrange a support call for you. Okay. So, and that's really important for us to do, because the groups get busier, and we want to be able to continue to grow the groups for you and not hold any wait lists as well. So they've got to be managed really, really well.
6,500 members and no waiting list. Don't tell your GPs that.
So, you know, we're very mindful of the fact that all of our members are the voices of experience when it comes to their experience of Lewy bodies. We get to go home at night time, you know, so I go home and I reflect and I learn from being with you in these peer support groups, and then I'm able to share it with the team. So we're constantly learning, and I'm so grateful for every one of you that comes to the meetings. And I'm hoping what you're going to hear now in the next few slides is the voices of our members coming through in what they say they talk about in the group, and some quotes from them. And as you would expect me to say this next bit, Nikki, they've all given permission for me to share it with you all. So, in fact, last week, before we go on to the topics, I had a call with recently new carer that joined RBS and had been to the Carers Dementia with Lewy meeting. And unprompted by me, these were the quotes that she shared with us. And I was a bit nervous because we still are keeping everybody, the carers, together, whether they're recently diagnosed supporting a family member or they might have a loved one in a care setting. And these were the things that she said. So it's not just valuable, it's invaluable. The members of the group are so positive, no woe is me. Now, we want our group to be empowering. We want it to be places where people bring problems and the other carers share strategies to say this is what's worked for me. So they're really this empowering situation. So that was really lovely to hear. You can have a little bit of a moan. Life's tough, you know, caring can be difficult. But this is the next bit here as well. You get little nuggets, you know, and that's because of the members in the group. And then what she said, because she'd only been twice, she says, I just see the devotion and it's inspiring. So that's credit to all of the family care supporters that come to the meeting. So you said topics.
Yeah, right. There's some little things that happen quite regularly, topics that they want to discuss.
Yeah, well, the hallucinations, as you can imagine, and vivid dreams, they're a thread that just sort of runs through each month. And we're always ready to have those conversations. But I'm not going to read them all actually, but you can see the kind of topics that actually come up in these meetings. And everybody's different as well. There's no sort of one solution that's going to fit all of the group. Everybody will want a different way of supporting their loved one.
And I think it is that sharing experiences from people that have been through it before, but also sort of a bit of sense checking as well from you as a professional within the group.
Yeah, and what's there to mop up? You know, sort of fill in those gaps maybe. What I'd like to share now is a scenario of a topic that came up. So this is a carer who brought an issue to a meeting a couple of months ago, and she very kindly gave me permission to share it with you today. And she says, I'm worried that the care home will not let me know that my husband has been taken to hospital. So the group were able to support this carer in around things that she could do to be proactive. And one of them was to make sure in the care notes within the care setting that the care home knew that she wanted to be notified if there was a transition into that care hospital setting as an emergency. Some of the carers mentioned John's campaign. John's campaign, I've got the link on the slide later on and you'll get that, which is where hospitals sign up to this, and it means that a family care supporter can be with that person in the hospital setting. So that was some really good advice. The This Is Me document that Alzheimer's Society have created with the National College of Nursing. One member said it's really helpful having one of those filled in, good to go. Another, it's like worth having one half filled in, and therefore you can actually fill in those last details. But I think the most important thing, as Member said, is it's the emotional support and safe space to talk about feelings and to get support in a way to deal with things as well. So that real emotional support was the real key. So that's just such a lovely example of the kind of conversation that happens within the carers group.
And I think what's really important as well is reflecting back to what Valerie said earlier. You don't know what you don't know. So what do? Ask. Fantastic. So we're going to go on to some living with now, and some of the topics that you think that you talk about, and they talk really openly, aren't they? I think you're like a man in the men's shed or down the pub with these guys.
No, it's lovely. They're all men, it's great. I had such a lovely morning, and they're so open, candid and honest about their experiences of living with Lewy bodies. So you can see the topics here, again, very similar. They kind of mirror in a way, but they share their experiences, and we continue those conversations from month to month. Now, before we move on to some of the topics, when I spoke to our members in the living room group, I asked them, what does the group mean to you? And these were, there were so many comments, but these were 4 that I was actually able to capture. And I like the top one. Number 1 is I now don't feel alone. That feeling of isolation we hear from our members when they first join. I just want to meet somebody else that's walking that same path, experiencing that same diagnosis as me. And I think the second comment here as well, I was worried about joining originally, and now I would miss it. The fear of what's they going to say, what are they going to share? Does that mean that's going to happen for me? But actually, he said I wouldn't miss it now, you know, so it's very much part of his routine and support. Subtle things people say in a comforting way, you know, to see that it's such a reassuring place. And this one I really like here. I enjoy the company of others that have shared their experience, and I feel consciously supported by this immensely friendly and supportive group. And that's credit to every single one of our members that comes to that group and shares.
And I think with these groups we have seen a lot of people asking to share details and contact details and made their own sort of buddies and I really resonate with what Jim was saying today, or you know, I really want to speak to them more. So it's seeing who gels in that group, isn't it?
I'm not rushing it. You know, these things do take time to build up those friendships. And the carers group's been going for a few months now, and we do a little map of the country. And we established that they were a little cluster in London. And, you know, they've all met today, and they've shared telephone numbers today, because they're going to try and meet up or have telephone calls as well. But that's taken a while. You know, we don't want to force these things. We really want to let you take it at your own pace.
All about having your own control.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our gentleman gave me permission to share a couple of scenarios with you. One of them was that it was all about falling over and that worry. So, one of our members said, I worry about falling over when I get up. And another member said, it's worse in social situations. And then another says, my brain says I need to take small steps, but my body is already moved. So we then throw it open to the group. So what kind of strategies, what kind of things can you think of that can help? So one of our members says, I wiggle my toes and my feet, and they thought that helped. Another says, I think through the process. We hear that a lot, you know, they think it through or they say it out loud. And in fact, a gentleman then says, I talk to my legs. You know, and that's a nice one. Another gentleman says, slowly. Just do everything slowly. One of our members, I think he's here in the back of, there is somebody here in the room that does PD Warrior, so I've got the link to that, which is an exercise class around movement, so says that helps him keep moving. And then someone else says, it will pass, keep going. So really positive and empowering support for each other for that. So another scenario is I want to go out, but I find the tubes and the train a minefield of hazards. And the first time I heard the gentleman say that, he said, it's a town underground. And you can really see how confusing that would actually be if you were living with Lewy bodies. Another said, I can't get up from the seat quick enough before the door closes. So that ability to move quick enough and feel safe that you could get out of the door. Another just said anxiety. Fighting the tide of people is confusing. It's a zoo, and I'm lost. So that's what they said. So we said, right, okay, so what are your strategies? How are you going to do this? How are you going to move about? So some of the ideas was buy the ticket and advance. Travel later in the day when it's less busy. Go with someone. One says, I find out where the tube and train stations have step-free access. Now I've included the link later on for you for that, so you can all look around the country and in London as well, where those stations are that have step-free access. One says, I plan ahead and I find a staff member straight away, tell them exactly where I want to go, north, south, east or west, and I ask them how many stops, and then I count them. And that was their way of being able to navigate the system. One says that they stand briefly at the top of escalators before standing on, and they found that helpful. And another said if there's a lift, they'll go and find it. Now we do know, don't we, that lift's not necessarily straightforward, but they said they prefer a lift to an escalator. And then the last one is, a gentleman says, I wear a sunflower lanyard.
Got some here today?
Yeah. However, I've got one gentleman that says, I really don't like lanyards. Why are they making me wear a lanyard? But he'll wear a t-shirt. So he wears a sunflower t-shirt.
Yeah.
So, great strategy. So anyway, that's enough of us talking about, how important it is. So there you go. There's the slide there. These are some of the recommendations that came up in the support group, and thank you very much, everybody, for sharing as well. I think that walking football day is on there. As Andrew said, get a dog and walk the dog.
Yay! We're going to wrap up then, Andrew. Well over time. I'm going to hand back to Rimona. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much. Do you want to just leave that up there actually? Because it's such a good list. And actually walking football, you can actually do it on the stadium. I had a patient last week who said that he was doing it on the Arsenal actual ground. And they get speakers in, I think, every other week as well, some of whom are either experts in Parkinson's or much more exciting, famous football players. So, and his eyes were lighting up when he told me about it. So, very inspiring to see. There's a lot to do. Wow, okay, that was a very inspiring session, and amazing to see it's sort of things initiated by people from this group. So I'm going to wrap up. We've gone over about 7 minutes. Sorry for a bit of extra time. Esther's got some leaflets to give out about her group, and actually Evelina's got some about Parkinson's dementia leaflets as well, so I hope Miss Camilla. There you are. Yes, you can find, Evelina will find you the leaflets. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our fantastic speakers. Laurent, thank you. You stayed. But thank you very much for coming, for your knowledge and your expertise on sleep. I think we've all gained a lot from your sessions. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to John and Phil for sharing your experiences. Thank you to Esther for showing us what you've been doing with the Lewy Body Support Group. Sian, thank you for the most amazing telling and the photographs of your mum and your family and the concert that you put on. And Karen and Nikki, thank you for telling us about the peer support. Nikki, thank you for organising this every time. Emma and Nikki, what we're going to do, twice a year, Nikki and I have a chat, like, what should we do? And I often go into it thinking, I don't know what it's going to be about. And then we come up with some magic somehow together. So thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Emma, for all the logistics, and Claire and Karen and Evelina and everyone else in the group. That's everyone. Oh, Sidra, thank you.